Jefferson High School, California. Every morning before sunrise, while most students were still curled up in bed and teachers were sipping their first coffee, the soft sound of sweeping echoed through the hallways of Jefferson High. The man behind that broom was Mr. Grayson, the school janitor. He was easy to overlook, always wearing the same dark blue overalls, slightly faded from years of use. His boots were worn down at the soles, and his thick-rimmed glasses constantly slipped down his nose. A grey beanie covered his thinning hair, and he never seemed to speak unless spoken to. Most of the students didn't even know his first name. To them he was just the janitor. Some were polite, most were indifferent, and a few were just cruel. "Yo, mop man, you missed a spot!" Senior quarterback Dylan Marks tossed an empty soda can on the just-mopped floor with a smirk. Mr. Grayson paused, looked up, and gave a small, gentle smile. "Thanks for letting me know," he said softly, stooping to pick it up without a trace of anger. Laughter rippled through the hallway as Dylan high-fived his friends. "Dude probably lives in the boiler room," someone muttered. "Bet he doesn't even have a phone," another said. "Guy's like a walking antique." Teachers were no better. While they didn't openly mock him, they rarely acknowledged him. The vice principal once complained that he took too long cleaning classrooms. The front office staff referred to him as quiet old Grayson, and dismissed him with a wave when he passed by. No one ever asked him how he was doing. No one thanked him for staying late after the Friday football games to clean up spilled popcorn and sticky soda off the bleachers. And no one noticed that whenever a kid couldn't afford lunch, Mr. Grayson would quietly slide a couple dollars into the cafeteria register when no one was looking. Grayson never responded with resentment. He never corrected their assumptions. He simply kept doing his job, meticulously, quietly, and without complaint. He cleaned up broken glass without scolding. He unclogged the boys' locker room toilets without protest. He swept through judgmental stares and hushed giggles like a ghost floating through the living. He had a small room tucked behind the gym. Most people thought it was just a storage closet. No one knew he actually lived there. A foldable cot, a small desk, a bookshelf filled with old classics and technical journals. This was his sanctuary. He cooked simple meals on a hot plate and spent his evenings reading by a flickering lamp. The town of Redwood Pines was small. People talked. Rumors grew like weeds. Some said Mr. Grayson had gone bankrupt. Others whispered he'd been fired from a factory job and never recovered. One wild theory claimed he used to be in jail. The truth was far stranger and far more extraordinary. But no one asked, because no one cared to know the man behind the mop. On a chilly Tuesday morning, the school counsellor, Mrs. Patterson, walked past Mr. Grayson as he knelt, fixing a broken bench in the courtyard. She paused briefly. "You really don't need to do all that. We could have just ordered a new one." Mr. Grayson looked up, brushed sawdust off his gloves, and smiled. "Why waste what can be fixed?" Mrs. Patterson hesitated. She'd heard that tone before. Steady, wise, calm. Not the kind of voice you expected from someone making minimum wage. She almost asked him a question. Almost. But her phone buzzed, and she walked away. That Friday, the senior prank went too far. Students dumped dozens of boxes of glitter, flour, and ketchup in the cafeteria and bolted. Chaos erupted. Grayson was already there, mop in hand, before anyone called for help. As Principal Harris and the teachers shouted orders, he worked silently, steadily, organizing the cleanup with the skill of someone who'd been managing chaos his whole life. He moved with purpose, directing the overwhelmed custodial staff, fixing a broken vacuum with parts he'd salvaged from old machines, even calming down an angry teacher who'd slipped on flour. "Damn," one freshman whispered. "He's like, actually smart or something." A rare moment of respect passed through the students watching him work, but it didn't last. By Monday, they were back to mocking him again. The truth was, Mr. Grayson had once been a man of immense power, wealth, and status, but you'd never guess it by looking at him now. He had stood in rooms filled with CEOs and venture capitalists. He had worn $1,000 suits and sat across from presidents and princes. He had been on magazine covers, honored for innovation in the tech world. But 10 years ago, he walked away from it all. Betrayed by those closest to him, exhausted by greed, and disillusioned by the superficial world he had helped build, Nathan Grayson disappeared from headlines. He donated most of his wealth anonymously, sold his mansions, deleted his social media, cut ties, and quietly returned to his hometown, choosing a job that forced him to be invisible, where he could observe people in their most honest moments, where no one expected anything from him. That afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon and students spilled out of school, Mr. Grayson stood by the front gate, sweeping leaves into a pile. A little girl, probably a freshman, paused beside him. "Why do you always smile when people are mean to you?" she asked, curious. He looked at her, his eyes kind. "Because most people are only mean when they don't understand, and that's not their fault." She tilted her head. "But don't you ever want to tell them who you really are?" He chuckled softly. "One day," he said, "they'll find out, but by then they'll see me differently, and maybe that will teach them more than any words ever could." And with that, he went back to sweeping, quietly, gently, invisibly, while the world around him kept looking without really seeing. But the storm was coming, and when it hit, they'd all learn the truth. The man they mocked for being nothing was actually worth everything. Redwood Pines, 2 weeks later. It started with thunder. The sky over Redwood Pines turned an angry grey by noon, and by 4 p.m. a violent storm had swallowed the town. Streets turned into rivers, trees bent like they were praying, power lines sparked and snapped. At Jefferson High, the wind rattled windows, and rain gushed down the walls like a broken dam. By morning, the damage was clear. The west hallway of the school was flooded. Water had soaked textbooks, shorted out light fixtures, and destroyed the main computer lab. The cafeteria's ceiling panels had collapsed, and the gym smelled of mold already forming under the bleachers. The school board was panicked. Classes were cancelled for the day. Principal Harris called an emergency meeting in the front office. "We don't have the budget to fix all this in time," she said, rubbing her temples. "We'll need to close the West Wing for weeks." "What about insurance?" asked the vice principal. "That'll take months to process." A few staff members began arguing, blaming the building's age, the maintenance budget, even the weather app for not giving proper warning. Then someone looked out the office window. Is that Grayson?" In the middle of the flooded courtyard, Nathan Grayson stood wearing a raincoat and boots. Water reached his calves, but he was calm, focused, like he'd seen worse. He pulled a long industrial hose from the supply closet, rigged a makeshift water pump using parts from the maintenance shed, and began draining the flooded halls with quiet precision. 2 hours later, he had removed most of the standing water from the West Wing. By noon, he was up on the roof, clearing out the gutters and patching minor leaks with industrial sealant. He even rewired a portion of the short-circuited power system using spare parts that most assumed were junk. He didn't ask for permission. He just worked. Principal Harris finally approached him at the end of the day. Where did you learn all this?" she asked, her voice half disbelief, half awe. Mr. Grayson looked at her with that same gentle smile. "Let's just say, I've been in a few situations where failure wasn't an option." She wanted to ask more, but before she could, a luxury car pulled into the faculty lot. A black Rolls-Royce, glossy, immaculate, completely out of place in a high school parking lot. The driver, a tall, sharply dressed man with salt and pepper hair, stepped out and looked around until his eyes landed on Grayson. "There you are," he said, walking over briskly. "You've been impossible to find." Staff members stared from the windows, slack-jawed. Grayson sighed. "Michael, you shouldn't have come here." "You haven't returned a single message in 3 years," the man snapped, clearly not used to being ignored. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to track you down when you don't leave a digital footprint?" The name, Michael Carrington, rang a bell for one of the younger teachers watching. He grabbed his phone and did a quick search. "Guys," he whispered, "that's the CEO of Carrington Ventures. He's on the Forbes list. Billionaire, tech investor." Back outside, Carrington continued. "We have a new project. Government contract. Top-tier cybersecurity. And I need you back, Nathan. We can't do this without you." Grayson didn't flinch. "You have hundreds of engineers. You'll figure it out." Carrington lowered his voice. "This place, Nathan, you're wasting yourself here. You built the foundation of Sonera Tech. You could be running the entire Silicon Valley." Mr. Grayson looked over at the school, the broken windows, the faded paint, the kids walking by without phones because they couldn't afford one. "Maybe," he said quietly, But these kids need someone who sees them, who doesn't want anything from them. Carrington stared at him. Then he nodded slowly. You always were stubborn. He pulled out a white envelope and handed it to him. That's your share from the final stock sale. I had it redirected to an untraceable trust like you asked. $84 million. You don't need to do this anymore. Grayson didn't even open it. I'm not here because I need to. I'm here because I choose to. With that, Carrington turned and left. The Rolls-Royce rolled away like a ghost into the misty rain. Inside the school, whispers turned into chaos. Did you hear what he called him? He built Sonera Tech? That's like Facebook-level stuff. He has $80 million? Students couldn't stop talking. Teachers couldn't believe it. The man they'd ignored every day for years was a literal tech legend. That night, the story spread like wildfire on Reddit and TikTok. Someone posted a blurry photo of Grayson and Carrington in the parking lot. A former Sonera employee anonymously confirmed Grayson's past. The caption, the janitor at my school is a billionaire and no one knew. By morning, the internet was on fire. Local news vans parked outside the school. Parents called in, shocked. Even alumni started commenting on old yearbook posts, remembering Quiet Nate from the class of '98. But Grayson? He showed up the next morning as usual. Overalls, beanie, mop in hand. He walked through the crowd of gawking students and reporters without a word, still smiling, still invisible in his own way. And while the world outside buzzed with questions, Grayson went straight to the broken locker in Hall B, knelt down and began fixing it, just like always. But now, every student walking by stopped, not to laugh, not to whisper, but to wonder, who else have we underestimated? For most people, a single revelation wouldn't be enough to change how they saw someone. But this was different. By Monday, Jefferson High was no longer just a sleepy suburban school. It was the school with the janitor who turned out to be a billionaire. National media picked up the story. The Today Show called the front office for an interview. TikTok creators speculated wildly. The phrase, Grayson the billionaire janitor, trended for 3 straight days. In class, students whispered rumors that got more absurd by the hour. I heard he invented FaceTime. No, bro, he built, the internet. He probably owns a rocket company and just mops floors for fun. Mr. Grayson, of course, said nothing. He kept working like he always had. He repaired the hallway clock. He reset the heating in room 213. He brought extra umbrellas from home and left them by the front doors for students to borrow during the rain. But things were different now, especially for those who had mocked him. Dylan Marks, the quarterback who used to call him Mop Man, couldn't even make eye contact as he walked past. He remembered every dumb comment he'd made, every piece of trash he'd thrown on the floor, thinking it was funny. It wasn't funny anymore. Principal Harris called a staff meeting to address the media situation. He never misrepresented himself, she said. He never asked for attention. He never broke a rule. We owe Mr. Grayson an apology, every one of us. But apologies were only part of it. The school had been forced to confront something bigger. They had judged someone entirely by how he looked, spoke, and dressed. They had treated kindness like weakness, humility like failure. That week, a local journalist published a long feature article titled The Silent Genius of Redwood Pines, Why Nathan Grayson Left Everything Behind. It detailed Grayson's early life, how he grew up in a single-bedroom apartment with his mother, how he taught himself to code on a donated laptop, how he co-founded Sonera Tech at age 26 and helped build one of the most secure encryption algorithms in modern history. It also explained how he walked away. After my partners took the company public and started cutting ethical corners, Grayson had written in a rare email response to the reporter, I realized that wealth doesn't equal peace. I didn't want power anymore. I wanted purpose. His net worth had once been over $300 million, but he sold most of his shares quietly, started anonymous philanthropic trusts, and moved back to his hometown. His goals were simple: give back, stay grounded, and see what people are like when they think you have nothing to offer. Turns out, he'd learned a lot. The following Friday, the school held an assembly, originally planned to celebrate the basketball team, but now everyone knew why they were really gathering. Mr. Grayson was asked to speak. He said no at first. "I didn't do any of this to be in the spotlight," he told Principal Harris. "I know," she said, "but I think you already are." He agreed, reluctantly. That morning, he stood on the auditorium stage in his same old clothes. Students filled the seats, buzzing with energy. A few teachers clapped quietly. Others just stared, embarrassed. He didn't need a microphone, but one was there. His voice was calm, clear, and unshaken. "I want to start by saying, I never blamed you for how you saw me," he said. "It's easy to judge. We're taught to do it without even realizing it. We learn to respect people with suits and titles. We assume value comes from money, not character." The room went quiet. "But people aren't what they show on the outside. The most powerful thing you can do is treat everyone with dignity, even when you think they have nothing, because you never really know." He glanced around. "You all thought I was a janitor, and I am, but I'm also a builder, a thinker, a leader. And the truth is, I was watching, not because I wanted to judge you, but because I wanted to understand who still sees people when the world tells them not to." A few students teared up. Even Dylan, sitting in the back, lowered his head. Grayson smiled. "I'm not here to make you feel guilty. I'm here to give you something better, a second chance. Not just with me, but with each other. The next time you see someone who looks different, talks different, lives different, ask yourself what they might know, what they might have lived through, what you might learn." The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was powerful. After the assembly, students lined up to shake his hand. Some asked for forgiveness. Others asked for advice. One shy girl handed him a drawing she'd made of him fixing a broken pipe with a golden crown on his head. He laughed and stuck it in his back pocket. In the days that followed, Jefferson High began to shift. The hallways were still noisy, still chaotic, but there was more kindness now. Students helped each other more. Staff stopped making snide comments about underpaid work. Even Principal Harris asked Mr. Grayson to help develop a new mentorship program for at-risk youth. But Grayson refused the offer to move into an administrative office. He kept his old room behind the gym. He liked it better there. No desk, no title, just tools, peace, and purpose. One morning while sweeping the courtyard, a sophomore named Tyler approached him. "Mr. Grayson?" "Yeah? Do you ever regret walking away from all that money and fame?" Grayson leaned on his broom for a moment. "No," he said. "I regret how many people I walked past back then without really seeing them. I regret thinking I had to be someone else to matter." He smiled. "But now, I get to be me, and still make a difference. That's the real kind of rich." Tyler thought about that. Then he nodded and walked away, eyes a little wider, heart a little fuller. Grayson went back to sweeping, just like always. But now, the whole school finally understood. The one they mocked was the man they should have admired all along. The school year at Jefferson High moved quickly after that. Mr. Grayson, once just the quiet janitor, was now something more than a story. He had become a symbol, not just of hidden wealth or unexpected power, but of integrity, of quiet strength, of choosing purpose over pride. But if you asked him, he'd tell you he hadn't changed at all. He still arrived before sunrise, sweeping the sidewalks before students arrived. He still wore the same boots, the same faded overalls, and still made his own black coffee in the little break room beside the boiler. He still read every evening from the same worn paperback copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. But around him, the world had changed. It began with one small ripple. A junior named Kayla, once known for mocking anyone too quiet, started a lunch club called Speak Easy, where students who struggled socially could talk without judgment. A senior named Malik, who had almost been expelled twice, started helping Grayson after school, learning how to fix things, how to work with his hands. By spring, Malik had applied for a trade school scholarship and won. Teachers, too, had softened. More eye contact, more thank yous, less complaining in the faculty lounge. Grayson wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a mirror. And everyone was starting to see themselves more clearly through him. Then came graduation day. The sun beamed down on rows of folding chairs. Families filled the bleachers. Students adjusted their caps, buzzing with nerves and anticipation. Mr. Grayson stood off to the side, arms folded, a soft smile on his face. He wasn't part of the program. He never was. Until Principal Harris stepped up to the podium and surprised everyone. "We have one final speaker today. she said. He didn't ask for this. He never asks for attention. But we've all learned something from him. Something we'll carry for life. She turned toward him. Mr. Grayson, would you join us? The students erupted in cheers, some chanting his name, others just clapping with full hearts. He walked to the stage slowly, the applause rising with each step. For a moment he said nothing, just looked out at the crowd of young faces who, months earlier, had laughed at him, and now looked at him with nothing but respect. Then he spoke. I don't have a fancy speech. I'm not good at that, but I do have one question for all of you. He paused. Who do you want to be when no one's watching? The graduates sat silent, listening. It's easy to chase titles, money, fame. Trust me, I had all of it. But those things don't build who you are. What builds you is how you treat people who can't offer you anything, how you behave when you think no one will ever find out. He looked over the crowd. Be kind without needing a reason. Work hard even when you don't get credit. Respect everyone, because one day you might be the person being underestimated. Then, with that quiet, steady smile, and never forget the real test of success isn't what you have, it's what you give. He stepped down as the crowd stood in a roaring standing ovation. That night, after the field had emptied and the stage was packed away, Mr. Grayson walked back toward his little room behind the gym. Malik was waiting outside with a small gift bag in his hand. I know you don't do birthdays or holidays or whatever, Malik said, but you changed my life, man. Inside the bag was a small handcrafted plaque. It read, The man who swept the floors and lifted a school. Grayson smiled, just a little more than usual. Thank you, son, he said, quietly. Malik nodded. See you tomorrow? Wouldn't miss it. The next morning, the school was quiet. Summer had begun, but Grayson was already out front, broom in hand, watching the sun rise through the trees, still cleaning, still smiling, still teaching, without a classroom. Because the man they once mocked, he didn't just turn out to be a billionaire. He turned out to be something even rarer, a man who didn't need recognition to change the world.